I'm retiring. Those are words that sometimes can strike fear in the heart of a client. Now, I want to put your concerns to rest now. I'm not retiring. In fact, I'm far from retiring. I love my job. I love doing what I do. I love serving my clients. But I'd like to tell you a story about a client who recently, a lady that recently became a client of mine, and we'll call her Betty. Betty had been working with a broker for many years. In fact, that gentleman had been with her for close to 20. Her husband had passed. She had hired this broker, and this broker took great care of her. The broker was old school. He knew that with her husband passing that she needed income in retirement. That was the most important thing that she needed in her life. And over the course of this 20-year relationship, she grew to trust him, he grew to know her, and he served her, and he served her well. But one day, he came to Betty and he said, Betty, I'm afraid that I've got some health problems and I need to retire. Well, of course, her first question was, well, who's going to take over? I need to know. And so he introduced her to the young financial advisor that was now going to be taking over his business. Well, it should have been a pretty smooth transition. But there's a couple of things that Betty didn't really count on, that she really didn't consider. And the first was the fact that even though the financial advisor and her had gotten along for 20 years, and he knew her and she knew him, and he knew exactly how to take care of her, well, that new financial advisor, he didn't. He didn't know much about Betty. In fact, he was so busy hitting the ground running, as they say, that he was not really taking the time to be able to really truly understand what Betty's needs and desires were. The second problem that Betty found was that, well, there wasn't the same set of ideals. You see, the old financial advisor, he knew the dangers of the market, and he knew what her number one priority was, and that was that of income. Income coming off from the interest and the dividends of the positions that she was holding. The income was the thing that allowed her to be able to preserve and protect her principal and allow her that income so she could live her life and she could live it in relative comfort. But the new financial advisor, well, his set of ideals, because he was young and he was aggressive and he wanted to grow assets under management, well, his ideal was growth. And you got to take risks to get growth. And so every time one of her individually held bonds would mature, instead of trying to go out and do the due diligence to find a new bond, which takes a lot of work, he's got to look at yield to call and yield to worse and yield to maturity, and he's going to look at all the different ratios. Well, he was relying upon the research of the company that he was working for. And he decided that it would be in her best interest to make her more aggressive. So he began trying to talk her into mutual funds and all sorts of ETFs and index funds. Number one, Betty didn't understand all of these things. He never took the time. He just said, trust me, this will work. But the only thing that ultimately happened was that she increased the amount of risk and she decreased the amount of income that she had coming in from month to month. It was all very confusing for her. But then there was one other underlying problem in this relationship that was brand new to Betty, and that was the cost. You see, the old financial advisor doing things the old-fashioned way. He was kind of old school. He believed it. He didn't need to make all of his money off from one particular client. And so he charged a nominal fee for doing what he did, something that was conservative, something that was very reasonable. Well, that new financial advisor, though, he had something to prove, and he wanted to grow his assets under management, and he wanted to do it as quickly as possible because he was working for this firm, and he knew that he was giving up at least 2/3 of his commission to the firm. So he was trying to sell things that had higher commissions. He was selling things that had embedded fees like 12b-1 fees and expense ratios. And what ultimately happened was he was putting her into a position where she was making less income and she was paying higher fees. But it doesn't stop there. You see, the old financial advisor was also very cognizant of taxes. He knew that taxes will always be a part of our life, but he wanted to try to keep a lid on Betty paying unnecessary taxes. The new financial advisor, he knew about taxes, but he would always say, well, I'm not your CPA, go talk to your CPA. Turned out that Betty was paying nearly $50,000 every single year in taxes. Can you imagine? Between what she had for assets and a simple farm that was making rental income, she was paying an enormous amount of taxes because she was a single tax filer. Instead of looking at things that were tax-free, instead of looking at things that were tax-deferred, he was just throwing her into all sorts of things that created capital gains, or he was buying and selling so that he could make the commission. Well, it wasn't too long and Betty had finally had enough. And Betty decided that it was time for her to look for a new business model. And I'm proud to say that today I work with Betty. But this video is a word of warning to you that if you see the handwriting on the wall, if your financial advisor is getting older and your financial advisor is looking for that exit strategy, you have to be very careful about what that new financial advisor who's taking over the business might ultimately end up doing. You see, the business model of the new financial advisor is going to affect you. And it's either going to affect you in a very positive way, or it's going to affect you in a very negative way. So there's your tip for retirement success. I hope that you consider what we discussed this morning, and I hope you the very best on your road to retirement. Remember, the successful retirement is the one in which you have more income than you will ever need. And as you retire, income is going to become more and more and more important to you. So if you're considering what's happening in your own retirement life and you decide that maybe you've outgrown the investments that you are currently in and you're looking more for principal preservation and better income, give us a call. I'm happy to spend a few minutes with you over the phone and help you understand how you potentially too could take what you've saved and turn it into an income stream that you can never outlive for the rest of your life. Have a great day. If you enjoy our videos and you get a little bit of value out of what we discuss every week, let me ask you to do me a favor. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It could be here, could be here, could be here, could be here. I'm not really certain where it's going to be. But hit that subscribe button, and if you would be so kind, it would be great if you would give us a big thumbs up. If you'd like more of the content, if you'd like to listen to my radio show, if you'd like to listen to some of the vignettes that we do that are short and sweet, which is always a good thing if you have a lack of time like I do, go ahead and visit our website at Johnson, WIM for wealthincomemanagement.com. And we'll see you around next week.